You've felt it. That feeling right after, when the warmth of the moment starts to cool and something underneath surfaces. Not quite sadness, not quite doubt, something harder to name. A question that you push back down because you're afraid of the answer. Does he actually want me? Or did he just want this? Most people never realize that the answer to that question is sitting right in front of them. Not in the future, not in the relationship conversations you haven't had yet, not in the promises he may or may not make. The answer is in the next 30 minutes, in what he does and doesn't do, the moment the reason he came for has been satisfied. Because here is the truth that changes everything. A man who wants you behaves completely differently after intimacy than a man who only wanted what you gave him. Not slightly differently, completely differently. And once you know the contrast, once you can see both sides of it clearly, you will never be able to unsee it again. If you've ever given a piece of yourself to someone and then lain there wondering whether it was received as a gift or taken as a convenience, this video is for you. By the end of it, you will know exactly what behavior separates the man who is invested in you from the man who is only invested in what he can get from you. And you will never have to wonder again. Let's name what's actually been happening. You've been trying so hard to be fair, to not jump to conclusions, to give him the benefit of the doubt, because you know that men show feelings differently, because you've been told you're too sensitive before, because the last thing you want is to sabotage something good by being insecure. So you minimized the feeling, the slight hollowness after, the way his attention shifted the moment the intimacy ended, the way you felt, and I want you to really sit with this word, used. Not because anything dramatic happened, just because the warmth was there and then quietly, without announcement, it wasn't. Here's the problem. We live in a culture that has taught women to pathologize their own instincts, to treat the inner alarm bell as anxiety rather than intelligence, to reframe every red flag as something to work through rather than something to heed. And so women who are deeply perceptive, women who are right about what they're picking up, spend years explaining away the behavior of men who were never serious about them. Not because those women are foolish, because they've been told their instincts can't be trusted. I want to give you something today that cuts through all of that. Not a checklist of perfect behaviors, not an impossible standard, just a clear, honest contrast between the way a man acts after intimacy when he is genuinely invested in you and the way he acts when he isn't. Because the behaviors are not subtle. They are not hard to identify. They have just never been laid out for you this directly before. Let's change that right now. Here are 8 differences between a man who truly wants you and one who is simply using you. The first difference shows up within minutes, sometimes within seconds. When a man is genuinely invested in you, he doesn't snap back to normal life the moment the intimacy ends. There's a transition, a warmth that lingers. He stays in the feeling, not performing it, not manufacturing it, just in it. He might be quiet. He might pull you close. He might lie there with his hand on you, not going anywhere in his mind or his body. The man who used you, consciously or not, returns to baseline immediately. And I don't mean he gets up and leaves, though that happens too. I mean his energy shifts. One minute he was fully present with you, and the next he is simply back to being a person in a room. The warmth evaporates. The attention redirects. He might start talking about something completely unrelated. His day, a sports score, something on his phone. Not because he's trying to hurt you, but because the thing that was holding his focus has concluded, and now his focus has moved on. And you feel it. That is not your imagination. That is your nervous system accurately detecting a withdrawal of presence. Nina told me she spent 2 years with a man she genuinely loved. She said, "Looking back, I can see it so clearly. The moment we'd finished being together, it was like a switch. He'd be warm, attentive, there. And then suddenly he'd be on his phone or talking about what he wanted to eat or asking if I'd seen his keys. And I'd feel this drop every single time." She said, "I told myself it was just how he was, that he wasn't a feelings person. But it wasn't that. He was warm and attentive when he wanted something. The moment he had it, I stopped mattering in the same way." She wasn't wrong in what she was feeling. She was wrong to explain it away. The man who stays in the feeling after the moment has passed is not being romantic. He's being honest about the fact that the moment was never only about one thing for him. But here's where it gets interesting. Watch where his attention goes the moment the intensity passes. A man who wants you, who is genuinely emotionally invested, naturally turns his attention toward you in the aftermath. Not in a performative way, instinctively. He notices if you seem cold and finds the blanket. He asks if you want water. He checks in with a look or a touch, a silent, "Are you okay?" directed entirely at your comfort, not his. This is what attachment looks like in practice. When we genuinely care about someone, their well-being becomes part of our awareness. We monitor it passively, the way you automatically notice if someone you love seems off. The care is not a conscious decision. It just happens because they matter. The man who is using you, and again, this is not always deliberate cruelty, sometimes it is simply a mismatch of feeling, tends to himself. His attention after intimacy flows toward his own needs, his own comfort, his own next move. He might be perfectly pleasant while doing it. He might even ask if you're okay. But as a social script, not a genuine inquiry. You can tell the difference because his question doesn't actually wait for an answer. Or it comes in the middle of him already doing something else. Gemma described it like this. She'd been seeing someone for about 3 months, and she said she should have seen the pattern sooner. After we were together, he'd always go straight to the bathroom, then come back and immediately look at his phone. Not mean about it, not cold, just automatic. His routine. She contrasted it with the man she's with now. She said, the first time we were together, he came back from the bathroom with a glass of water, without being asked. He just brought one, and he sat on the edge of the bed and asked me how I was doing. Not in a therapy way, just like it was the most natural question in the world. She said, I remember thinking, oh, that's what it's supposed to feel like. Aftercare is not a bonus, it's a diagnostic. Watch where his attention flows when there's nothing left to want, and you'll see exactly how much he values what remains. Now, this next one is going to require some honesty from you. This is the hardest one to talk about, but it is the most important one on this list. And I'm going to need you to be brutally honest with yourself for a moment, because this isn't about what happened. It's about how you felt in the aftermath. When a man genuinely wants you, all of you, not just what you offer him physically, being with him leaves you feeling more seen, more valued, more like yourself. There's a settledness afterward, a quiet warmth, not just physical satisfaction, but something deeper. The feeling of having been received by another person, of having been with someone who was fully there with you. Now, here is the question I want you to sit with. After being with the person you're thinking about right now, the one who brought you to this video, how did you actually feel? Not how you told yourself to feel, not the story you constructed afterward, not the optimistic interpretation you decided to go with. How did you actually feel? Think about that for a second. No performance, no justification, just the raw, honest answer. Because here's what I know from working with thousands of women on exactly this question. The woman who has been genuinely wanted feels full after intimacy. The woman who has been used, even gently, even without malice, feels subtly empty. Sometimes immediately. Sometimes it creeps in. But it comes. That particular hollow feeling that sits underneath the good parts of the night. And the truly devastating thing? Most women name that feeling as their own inadequacy. I'm too needy. I'm too attached. I'm reading too much into this. They turn the evidence of his insufficient care into a character flaw in themselves. Let me tell you about Jess. Jess was 31 and had been with someone for 8 months. She was smart, accomplished, kind, and every time she saw him, she felt wonderful during the time together. But she told me, the moment he'd leave, there'd be this feeling, like I'd given something and it hadn't quite landed anywhere, like throwing something into fog. She said she thought she was being dramatic. She said she'd journaled about it, analyzed it, decided it was her attachment wounds, her anxiety, her past. And then, months later, she left him. And a year after that, she was with someone new. And after the first time they were together, she told me, I waited for the fog, and it didn't come. I just felt good, whole, like the evening had been about both of us. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I finally understood that the fog wasn't mine. It was his. It was what he created by not actually being there. The fog wasn't hers. It was his. How many women right now are carrying emotional weight that belongs to someone else? How many are treating their correct perception of insufficient love as evidence of their own too muchness? Your feelings after intimacy are data. When you feel whole, you have been genuinely met. When you feel hollow, you have been harvested. Trust that. Honor that. Stop arguing yourself out of it. The way you feel when he leaves is not a reflection of your neediness. It is a reflection of his investment. Learn to read it as the honest report card it is. And if that one landed, this next contrast is going to be just as clarifying. The man who wants you has a future in mind that includes you. And after intimacy, when his feelings are most present and least defended, that future has a way of showing up in conversation. He doesn't make grand promises, but he mentions things. He says, I want to take you to that place you mentioned. He says, next time we should. He names a day. He talks about something coming up that he'd like you to be part of. The future he references has you in it, specifically, naturally, without being prompted. This is not calculation. He's not trying to secure your investment by dangling a future. He just genuinely can't imagine the next good thing without putting you in the frame. The man who is using you, knowingly or by emotional unavailability, goes strangely abstract after tonight ends. Ask him about next weekend and he's suddenly not sure what he has going on. The warmth of the present dissolves into vagueness about the future. He might say, I'll text you, and mean it in the way people mean, let's get coffee, as a social habit rather than a real intention. The shift is stark if you know to look for it. Before and during the evening, he is present and warm. The moment the conversation turns toward tomorrow, he equivocates. He hedges. He gives you enough to keep hope alive, but not enough to constitute a real commitment. Amara had been seeing someone she really liked. She said, he was so attentive when we were together, looked at me like I was the only person in the world. And then one night I asked casually if he wanted to go to this thing the following weekend, a market I knew he'd enjoy. And he just went weird. Said, maybe, let's see, it depends on a few things. And I noticed that the quality of his presence completely changed the moment I introduced the idea of next week. She said, that was the moment I understood. He was very much there for now. He just wasn't planning for then. When someone is only available in the present tense, they're telling you something real about how they see you. A man who genuinely wants you can't help but put you in his future. When he keeps the future vague, it's not uncertainty about his schedule. It's uncertainty about his commitment. This contrast is deceptively simple, but it cuts deep. The man who wants you understands, consciously or not, that how you feel when you walk out the door matters. That you are a whole person whose experience of leaving is part of his responsibility. So he does something. He says something real before you go. He walks you out. He texts you within the hour. Not a performance of effort, just a simple acknowledgement that the night meant something and that you matter to him beyond the duration of your time together. He protects your dignity by making it impossible for you to leave wondering. The man who is using you, he lets you walk into the uncertainty. He says goodbye warmly enough, no cruelty, no dismissal, but then silence. An hour passes, several hours, maybe the next day. And in that gap, you are left assembling meaning from nothing. You are left carrying the weight of not knowing alone. And here's what's particularly cruel about that pattern. It's not even necessarily intentional. He might not be consciously deciding to leave you in suspense. He might simply not be thinking about you at all. Because once you've left, his attention has moved fully on. You were the thing occupying his focus while you were there. Now that you're not, the slot is empty. That absence of thought, that ease of not wondering about you, is itself the answer to the question you've been asking. Layla put it simply. She said, "The man I'm with now texted me before I even got home. I was literally still on the motorway and my phone lit up. It was him, saying he'd had a really good night and that he was already thinking about when he'd see me next. She contrasted it with her ex. With him, I'd drive home analyzing the evening, trying to decide if it had been a good night, trying to remember his exact words, and my phone would be quiet, sometimes until the next afternoon. And in that silence, I'd feel, she trailed off, small. I'd feel small. You should never be made to feel small by someone's silence. You should not have to earn the basic reassurance that the night meant something. How you feel in the hours after you leave tells you everything about how he thinks about you when you're not there. Silence is an answer. Make sure you're reading it. This is the pattern that breaks the most women, not because it's the cruelest, but because it's the most confusing. And confusion, when it comes to someone we care about, has a way of keeping us locked in place for far longer than we should be. The man who genuinely wants you is warm all the way through. Not just during the evening, not just when desire is running high, but in the hours and days that follow. His temperature doesn't change based on how recently he's gotten what he wanted. He's the same man. Maybe quieter sometimes, maybe busier, but fundamentally consistent in how he treats you. The man who is using you runs hot and cold. And the maddening thing about this pattern is that the hot is so convincing. When he's warm, he is so warm, attentive, affectionate, present, exciting. You feel chosen. You feel electric. And then the cold comes. Not immediately, not the same night, but after the need that brought him to warmth is satisfied, the temperature drops. The texts thin. The energy withdraws. And then, just when you've started to adjust, just when you've started to protect yourself, the heat comes back. Because he's cycling into wanting something again. This is not a mystery. It is a rhythm. And once you see the rhythm clearly, warmth when he wants, distance when he has, you will understand that his hotness was never about you. It was about him, about what he needed in a given moment. Sophie described it as being in orbit. She said, it was like being a planet being pulled in by a star. Every time he reached for me, the gravity was so strong. And then it would just dissipate. And I'd be out there on my own again. And I'd spend the whole time waiting to be pulled back in. She said, I finally realized that I had been spending all of my energy being in orbit around someone who wasn't actually thinking about me half the time I was thinking about him. When a man's warmth is reliable only in the context of want, be honest with yourself about what that tells you. Consistency is the one thing that cannot be faked over time. A man who is genuinely invested in you stays warm even when he has no immediate reason to be. Watch the in-between moments. Those are the real ones. One more. And this last one is the one I need you to hear most. The man who wants you is interested in you. Not the role you play in his life, not the feeling you give him, not the function you serve. You. Your mind, your history, your dreams, your contradictions, the things that make you specifically you. You will feel this in how he asks questions, not perfunctory questions that serve as social filler, but real ones. Questions that go somewhere. Questions that come back to things you said weeks ago. Questions that feel like they're building a picture of you that he intends to keep looking at. The man who is using you is interested in the experience you provide. He might be charming, attentive, even curious seeming during the performance of intimacy. But the curiosity doesn't hold. It doesn't deepen. The questions don't stack. He doesn't remember the things that matter because he was never building a picture of you to keep. He was accessing a feeling he wanted, and you were the means of accessing it. Vera had one sentence that said it all. She told me, after 6 months, he didn't know my mother's name. 6 months. And he had never once in 6 months built up enough genuine interest in her life to know something as simple and central as what her mother was called. She wasn't invisible to him. She was just functional, present when needed, not thought about when not. You are not a function. You are a full, complex, irreplaceable person. And the man who sees you that way will make it known through the only reliable currency there is: sustained attention to who you actually are. The last sign is the one that lives deepest. And it's the one that once it clicks, you'll find yourself applying to every relationship you've ever had. When a man genuinely wants you, you feel safe being real around him. Not just the curated, appealing, best foot forward version of you, but the tired version, the complicated version, the version that's uncertain and a little too much sometimes. You feel like you can say the real thing, take up the real space, and be received for it. That safety comes from him, from his consistent acceptance, from the absence of judgment in his eyes, even when you're showing him something unpolished, from the fact that he stays when the performance stops. The man who is using you, whether he means to or not, creates an atmosphere where you feel like you have to earn his continued presence, where you monitor yourself, where you self-edit and second-guess and manage his impression of you constantly, where you feel like any wrong move, any moment of being too much or not enough will cost you something. That feeling of monitoring yourself around someone, that is not love. That is not safety. That is the lived experience of being with someone whose acceptance is conditional, contingent on you continuing to provide something they want. B described 2 relationships back to back. She said, with the first one, I used to rehearse things I wanted to say before I said them. I'd calculate whether a joke would land before I made it. I was always performing a version of me I thought he wanted. Then she said, with my partner now, last week I cried at a bread commercial and told him about it. And he didn't look at me like I was strange. He asked about the bread commercial. She laughed. I know that sounds small, but that's what safety actually looks like. It looks like the bread commercial. Mini insight. The right man doesn't make you feel like you have to earn your place. He makes you feel like your place was never in question. That is what you are looking for, and it exists. 8 contrasts. 8 clear, honest differences between the man who genuinely wants you and the man who is simply using what you offer. Let me name them one more time quickly because I want them to stay with you. The man who wants you stays in the feeling. The other snaps back to normal. The man who wants you tends to your comfort. The other tends to his. The man who wants you makes you feel whole after. The other leaves you feeling hollow.